So welcome on board. Welcome to the webinar today on behalf of Google News Initiative, India Training Network, and DataLEADS. I extend a warm welcome to all our participants and our speaker today for this very, very important webinar on mental well-being. Why are we here today, and what is the topic, and why is the topic so important? The topic today is how journalists and fact checkers can protect their mental health from all the online abuses and the trolling that happens to them, and which creates a lot of stress. With the rise of the use of social media specifically everywhere, we've seen that journalists and fact checkers are one of the main targets of online abuse and trolling. These attacks lead to a lot of psychological issues, a lot of psychological effects. You know, people get anxious, they get fear, they get stressful, and therefore this workshop is really important, which actually wants to provide, the idea behind it is that we want to provide participants with steps to protect their mental health and emotional well-being from online harassment, and to ensure that we are strong, mentally strong to handle any such trolling or any such abuse. My name is Surabhi Pandit Nangia, and I'm the Vice President, Outreach and Partnership with DataLEADS. Before we go any further, this is one slide that we would always want to talk about. This is our journey, how we started in 2018. And this is one of the pictures of the network, of few of our friends. I wish we could put all the pictures in here, but it's not possible. But how we started and how are we on the numbers, I would just take one moment to take people here. You know, I think they also feel the pride when we talk about it. So the Google News Initiative, India Training Network, started in 2018, and it's world's biggest, most impactful fact-checking networks. The network, the idea behind the network and why we started was to support journalists and media educators from across India in their fight against misinformation and fake news. Led by DataLEADS, the network has so far trained over 39,000 plus. I mean, we could be touching 40,000 any day. We've trained over 39,000 plus journalists and media educators and journalism students and fact checkers across so many cities and states, with over 770 workshops held both in person and online. So online is something that we need to add after the COVID times, but we've done beautifully. All our trainers, thanks to all our GNI trainers who've transitioned beautifully during the COVID times and continue to conduct trainings online. So before we go and before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. This particular webinar is going to be, this is on a webinar mode to avoid disruption. Sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, we keep our mics on, and sometimes the speaker can get a little disrupted. If you have any questions, which of course we know that you will, all that you need to do is type it on your chat box down below. We will ensure that by the end of the session, our speaker, Dr. Debanjan, will take as many questions as possible, permitting with the time permits. And yes, it's not a part of the housekeeping, but another very important announcement is that here, this workshop, there is going to be no judgment. We will not judge each other. So please, or any anxieties or any experiences, please feel free to do that. We worked together, and the reason that we are here, the reason this workshop is being conducted is because we want to help each other. So let's ensure that we come out and we say whatever that we have felt or experienced in the past. So that was all about housekeeping. That was all about the GNI. One small exercise before we start is this exercise. We've done this like the entire life. We've done scramble, unscramble. Here is a list of words that you need to unscramble. And all that you need to do is type it on the chat box below, put your name, and of course you'll have your name. And please write the correct unscrambled words. And we will give you the correct words at the end of the session, not right now. And let's see then who does it first. We will, of course, pull out the one who's done the first. Do it. I think I'll wait for 10, 15 seconds quickly and then move on so that all of you can have a look at the slide and unscramble it and put it down there. All done? Okay. So this is what we are here for, and Dr. Debanjan is not new to us. He's been conducting sessions for us in the past as well. And without any further delay, we will turn the time over to our trainer today, Dr. Debanjan Banerjee, who's the MD, DM at NIMHANS, Bangalore, FIPS consultant, and a neuropsychiatrist with Apollo in Kolkata now. Dr. Debanjan is really, really passionate about mental health, specifically in the field of journalism. He's extensively writes about it. Some of you would have also read his columns, and has conducted many training sessions on well-being of journalists. Thank you, Dr. Debanjan, for the mental well-being of our journalists and fact-checkers and our media educators. With that, it's over to you.
Thank you, Survi. I am audible, I guess, right?
Absolutely, loud and clear, Dr. Debanjan.
Right, thank you. And a warm welcome and very good afternoon to all the attendees. And I just resonate with Survi just mentioned that this is just going to be an informal discussion to the best of it. So there is no judgment, no assessment, and of course, you are free to not only share your questions, but also free to share your experiences, because that's how we all learn. And I consider myself just the facilitator of this workshop, but I guess, you are the ones who will be able to share much more perspectives as to what we are going to discuss today. So thanks DataLEADS and GNI for this very, very pertinent workshop. This kind of, takes on from the same place where we did our last workshop on kind of stress and trauma in journalists. And if we separate one thread of stress and trauma in journalism, that's going to be probably what we are going to discuss here today. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I hope the slides are moving.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So this is what we are going to talk about, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A towards the end of the session. I'm sure that, online abuse, trolling, harassment need no separate introduction to any one of you. People who work online, especially journalists, fact checkers, who have to spend a lot of time debunking news or, gathering news from different portals, sharing them, have faced this at some point or the other in life. I mean, I have a journalist friend from Delhi, and she always tells me that if you have not been trolled in your career as a journalist, then probably you haven't really had your job right. So, which essentially means that, if you are in the field of journalism, you may not come across overt abuse, but you will be coming across intersections and crossroads with many people. And, where opinions will vary, there will be clashes, there won't be a linear way of communication. The tough part of all this is, this does affect our mental health. And there is no point denying this, because at some point of a time, we know that this is really kind of getting on our nerves. And what I'm going to do here today is discuss or, bring your attention to some very basic angles as to how you can kind of shelter or cocoon your mental well-being from this, very, very common distress in journalism. Now, when we talk about abuse or when we talk about troll, now trolling is, of course, a very exotic, trending term. In fact, I was just discussing with one of my other psychologist colleagues that day, and she was mentioning to me how the research on trolling has kind of exponentially increased at the time of COVID, with a very high or increased digital interface over the last 2 years. But there are different parts of online abuse as well. There can be relatively benign things like just a comment, or something which is called doxing, something which is very benign form of trolling, to more serious problems with online abuse like cyberbullying, security threats, cyber stalking, something which is called fraping, which I'll be coming to later on, hate speech, and when the threat kind of comes down to your own or your loved ones' physical security. Now the problem is with the virtual space, with this cyberspace, as we put it, it's everybody can be anonymous, and there is so much of data around you, and there is so much of online presence that it is extremely difficult to even sometimes find out as to where the origin of this abuse was. And that leads to probably much more of anxiety. So what can be the different forms of online abuse? Now, gossip, somebody posing as someone else, which is called masquerading, harassment, which can be even sexual, and I'll be discussing an entire section on how sexism and how women journalists have an additional brunt of this problem. Exclusion from discussion, from groups, from social media groups, cyber stalking, which can have dangerous consequences. And I'm sure many of you have faced this, that when things have gone out of hand, a lot of people have continued to troll you to a point that you have really found it difficult to go ahead with that part of news. And what I was just telling some time back, framing, where you post messages, images of a particular person to another group without the consent, and flaming also, where you know that there is a discussion against a person going on, and you kind of just incite it by either online content or image or whatever it is. Now, why I'm telling you about all this form is that at the end of the day, it depends as to what is the extent, the severity, the duration, and the type of abuse. What is it that it's leading to, how it is affecting you. There are many people who take this with a pinch of humor, and, things kind of go on without much difficulty. But when things tend to get personal, when it hurts you emotionally, then the mental health can really, really be affected, and things can be chaotic. Now, here are just, certain things to bring to your attention. Based on the report by the ICFJ, I'll be coming to it a little later, 65% of journalists globally face online abuse. And imagine what can be the extent of a number if it is 65%. Online trolling has tripled during COVID pandemic. Not only does it have personal attacks, but there can be sexist, racist, casteist comment, which are significant. There is a marked women to men dichotomy. Women journalists face much more of harassment, sexual innuendo-based online abuse, and personal attacks, verbal abuse. Gaslighting is quite common in journalism circle when they face online abuse. And time and again, I'll bring this up because this leads to maximum mental distress when it's an existential threat. Your security is threatened. I suggest all of you go through these documents, which are very brief and freely available online. This study was done by the UNESCO in association with the International Center for Journalists, that is ICFJ. Many of you are aware of this international body, and it was actually led by Dr. Julie Posetti and Dr. Nabila Shabir. who is also an Indian of Indian origin, which specifically shows the global survey of online violence against women journalists. And the data that comes out is kind of shocking, that women are affected disproportionately as increasing time. The more and more women are kind of into journalism, they're doing pretty well. So when we are trying to kind of abolish the sex differences in all other aspects of work, this seems to be extremely disproportionate. So 20% of them have been attacked and abused offline. More than half, so out of people who are affected, imagine the help seeking was so less. So kind of only 55% sought any form of help, be it medical, psychological, legal. And what were the content of the news based on which this abuse or attack was done? So it was most commonly related to gender, followed by politics or elections or news about politicians, followed by human rights or social policies. So I would be taking your perspectives in the end, and also feel free to put down in the chat box if you have faced abuse, if you have dealt with news containing these themes, or do you think that, this study, of course, is not at all from India, so it's very, very West biased. We are yet to have a study like this in India, hopefully with good intentions of the researchers in this field. But if you have your personal experience tells otherwise, please do feel free to put it in the chat box. And further, it's very pertinent here that DataLEADS is conducting this workshop, because I have kind of, as Surabhi was mentioning, worked with health analytics and DataLEADS for some time. And what they do is a brilliant work in debunking health-related misinformation. And also, if you see in this report and generally in research, a significant chunk of this online abuse is directed towards people who are fact-checking. So many of these attacks are a part of orchestrated disinformation campaigns. And one greatest example recent times is that of the anti-vax campaign in COVID. And also it has happened previously with polio vaccines, with measles vaccine, and with pneumococcal vaccines. Out of all the social media, Facebook was considered to be least safe. And one of the things which repeatedly came up was self-censorship. So at one point of time, the journalists who get attacked, they kind of, are extremely cautious and careful, and they trim a lot of the content that they post online. So it becomes to an extent that sometimes you are not even free to post, what you want to. And if, it's ironic and it's sad that if a journalist is not able to really portray or express what he or she wants to, then that is actually that speaks quite bad for our public health and for our general well-being as a whole, because they are supposed to basically present the true news in front of us. These are some of the data where you see that the most significant impact of online violence was on mental health and feeling physically unsafe, security threats. The type of online threats most commonly was abuse, and followed by harassment and reputational threats. Probably that is why today we are having a workshop related to mental health. And I'll kind of just take a brief pause here, because before we go further, your opinion, your perspectives matter a lot. So now feel free to just post in the chat. And as I told you, there is no judgment. So just feel free to type any reply that you want. Let's first come to the first question. How often do you face online abuse? You can just type, once a week, few times a month, multiple times, very often, anything, any phrase, any adjective. Feel free to post in the chat. We'll just wait for 10 seconds. So fast. Can we have some quick responses? How often do you face online abuse. Okay, once a week. Anyone else? Rarely. That's fantastic. Not very often. Okay. Probably let's go down a little bit. Let's tone it down a little bit. Let's make it trolling. So how often do you face trolling? It's because trolling is usually considered a very benign form of online violence. So we have all responses ranging here from very often to rare. Okay, let's go to the next question. What type of online abuse or trolling do you face? I mean, you can just put in a word based on all the types that I described earlier. What is the type that you most commonly face? Do you face physical threats, just a comment, gaslighting, frapping, somebody just attacks you personally? What is it? This would be very interesting for me to know. Comments, okay. Often in the garb of harmless trolling, comments on points of view, yeah. So many times, there will also be people who will indirectly tell you that what you are doing is not right, but not directly mention your name. Comments, okay. First, any other responses? Anything much more serious have any of you faced? I hope not, but if physical threat, okay. Now, of course, all the physical threats are not serious, but when you get a physical threat, you don't know. Caste, yes, that's actually something which is quite distressing. Fine. The $1 million question, how do you react? Well, I'm sure that all of you, okay, I was just going to tell ignore, but everybody of you cannot ignore. Okay, report. Okay, we have got a bipolar response from ignore to report. Anything in between? Do you reply back? Subtly reply. Okay, ignore. No. Okay. Quickly, next few seconds. That would be reverse trolling. Okay. Well, reverse trolling is indeed considered to be one of the strategies if the trolling is very persistent, but if it is benign, But of course, rather than attacking the other person, sometimes in political or social issues, you can always put forward what you think is right or substantiate whatever you have told with evidence. Now we'll come to that later. Thank you so much for your responses. We'll move ahead. So what are the sensitive themes? As we all discussed, these are, of course, on a global context, but I'm sure many of them will also match with our nation and South Asia in general. So gender issues, refugee status, religion, politics, human rights, disinformation, and very importantly, investigative journalism. So obviously, there are many other issues outside these domains where you can face trolling, but these are probably the most sensitive themes. I mean, if any of you disagree, if anybody of you agree, please again feel free to post in the chat. We can take it up during discussion. What are the risk factors? Not to mention gender, unfortunately, is a major risk factor. People who are new, people who are now here, this is debatable. Many people think that only newcomers are trolled or abused online. Now, that is not true. By new, what I mean is people who have been on, desk journalism or mainly in print journalism, and then they kind of transform to social media. But experience in general doesn't really have much to do with whether you are trolled or abused online. Probably experience has something to do with how you react, But, and this is research proven. It's many of the ICFJ data shows this. Anonymous profiles, when people do not know your identity, you tend to kind of get picked up more. One of you were mentioning reverse trolling. Yes, aggressive replies to abuse do invite more trolls, more of digital time, particular time duration when, most people are on social media, more active. When there is no network supervision, or when there is no supervision by senior colleagues, lack of social support, especially when you are not able to disclose that, these are the problems that are happening with me. And when you do not want to seek help, many times when I have my journalist friends and colleagues talk to me, or I have my patients, many times they have told me, it happened first 5 years back. But that time I thought that I'm a journalist. I am supposed to have tough skin to all these. So why will I go to a mental health professional? And that's the start. Once you really start feeling ashamed or guilty to seek help for your mental health, there is only the slope moves downwards. So at least the very basic request that I would have to each one of you, once you go out of this workshop, even if you do not wish to, if you think everything else or everything else you are okay with, you remember, fine. But one thing, if you or if anyone known to you in the field of journalism face this issue and they do want to seek mental help or help for mental well-being, please, please, please encourage them to do it as early as possible. There is no shame, there is no guilt. What are the psychological effects? Now, as a psychiatrist, this would be probably most important to me. Reduced self-esteem. It's not always about feeling depression or having PTSD or having anxiety. Even when you do not have a quote-unquote diagnosis, it affects your self-esteem. It affects the way you think. Some of you were mentioning that you think 10 times before posting something. So your freedom, your autonomy gets challenged. Isolation. You feel that, okay, if you are isolated on social media, that has become so much of a part of our lives now, we kind of feel that we are also alienated from our social circles. Anger, sense of rejection, guilt. Many of you, many of the journalists are absent from work. They have impaired productivity. They are not able to do the things that are expected of them many times. Sleep disturbances and nightmares are extremely common. And further, if this persists, it can lead to depression, post-traumatic stress, and even when all these things are happening, you can have a lot of physical ailments, chronic headache, neck ache, feeling that your muscles are tense. In general, it has been proven that when you are in front of the laptop and when there is something which is very stressful going on in the screen, your neck and your head muscles get extremely tense. So that leads to, if that happens day after day, your entire hand, your elbow, your neck, your head, top of your eyes will kind of tend to pain. And it's a very dragging, nagging pain which will not respond to paracetamol or other analgesics. Now, that can often be a sign of stress. Gastritis, digestion issues, low back pain, panic attacks, and many such problems. So next time you face any such problems without a definite understanding of whether something has happened to your body, make sure you think whether your online time is going fine. Again, time for me to get your perspectives. How do others react when you mention about online abuse in journalism? Let's say you have gone and told anyone, okay, see, this has happened to me today. And how did they respond? In a few phrases. Please, can you quickly type your replies? It will be interesting to know what people have told you. Wonderful. It's a part of your job. That's the very common reply that I get when I go and tell my family members that, I'm very stressed today. They console. Okay. That's good. What else? Has somebody dismissed ever? Have somebody told that you have to grow out of it? Right. Yes, that's again something which is very common. Shrug. Yes, sometimes physical responses mean a lot, much more than mental responses or verbal responses. This suggests of your theoretical things. Okay, I just hope the workshop will not be theoretical today. What else? Anyone else? Quickly, few seconds. They ask you to use your contacts and give a fitting reply. Okay, this is the most interesting response. Yes, I think, why I asked this question to you is that many times people may not really have an understanding of, what is really going on. Because when you normally go and tell someone online abuse, at least this has happened with me. Many of you may differ. But when I have discussed this with many other people who are, let's say, even people who are journalists and people who are not, they kind of always give me this kind of look and tell, what is happening? Somebody is just creating fun with you. Why don't you just reply back? And the seriousness, I am probably telling in this manner to you because I have faced this. Then when somebody sits in front of me and cries their heart out, telling that I do not want to do my job, I am feeling extremely insecure, psychologically vulnerable, and threatened every day. And that is serious. So we need to know, very importantly, the line where it becomes serious, because if that is crossed, then your mental well-being is going to be seriously compromised, and you will have difficult time in making people understand. Interestingly, when Jyoti and Parul told me to do this workshop, we were in the phase of conducting a study, and probably it's going to get published in next couple of months. We were just trying to see the subjective experiences of journalists in terms of the challenges that they faced when they report. Now, a part of it was related to online abuse and online violence. And many of the things that you guys responded, this is what we got. And I'm not sure how many of you will resonate with it. So no response, people did not respond at all, or they just diverted the topic. I am sure they didn't mean it. So again, ignore. वो कुछ नहीं होगा, वैसे लोग बोलते हैं. Just grow out of it, man. It's a part of your job. Why are you bothering? It happens day in and day out. Do not bother. Just go on with your work. That's a response which very commonly comes from even your media colleagues. Happens in this profession. As somebody of you told, it's a part of the job. Please grow a tough skin. That's a very common response. I'm sure many respond in this manner, even if you tell someone that you are facing depression. So many people link mental strength, quote unquote, or psychological resilience abuse. Come on, this happens all the time. Now, be it online abuse, physical abuse, intimate partner violence, elder abuse, any form of abuse, if normalized, is going to just perpetuate that. Now, let's face the myths. This should be clear when we finish the workshop today. When you are abused in any form, you do not grow out of it. It has an impact. You cannot be immune to online abuse. None of the journalists or fact checkers or person can sit and tell, because of my experience or this, ABCD, today online abuse doesn't matter to me. If he or at some point it will bother, how you react to it is different. You cannot just neglect it. At one point, if you do not take steps, either indirect experience is not related to getting trolled online. As I was telling you last time, there is no shame or guilt in seeking help. Strength or being mentally strong has nothing to do with how you feel when you are abused. I'm a psychiatrist. I know all these things that I'm discussing with you today. If there is somebody or someone who tells me directly or indirectly something bad or something contraindicative, I feel hurt. It's as simple as that. And as many of you have pointed out, trolling or repeat abuse or reply abuse cannot be the answer if you are abused online. So if you were to troll someone very benignly, let's say, what would be the reason? I'm sure many of you here have trolled your friends online playfully, even if it is outside the purview of journalism. What would be the reason? What would trigger you to troll someone? If now nobody replies, I will assume that they are hiding the facts. Come on, I mean, we have all done it sometime. Okay, fine, thank you. Their beliefs, if they do not, or if they seem very silly to me, I'll tell you, you know what makes me sometimes, when I see people making very generic comments, especially about mental health, which happens all the time, I immediately have that urge to respond in a very violent manner. When they talk illogical, I disagree with their views. Okay, disagreement, opinion, difference in logic. What else? Have you ever trolled someone simply for the fun of it? You know, why I put this was because gender comments, yeah, there's something extremely important when they repeatedly troll others. Yes. See, what happens is, why I told this is it's very important in this, you know, in this workshop or when we have this kind of discussion, to have a perspective of why somebody would troll you. You know, I'm sure that when you have attended workshops of intimate partner violence or gender abuse, you have always seen that the psychology of a perpetuator or the psychology of an abuser becomes extremely important if you have to process or if you have to react to them. Some other responses have come that won't be trolling, simple harmless comments, okay, only if I know them very well. Now the problem is, you know, nowadays the word troll is considered, it's not really in its literary meaning anymore, at least in the research purview, in the cyber research purview. Trolling can be from very benign, simple comments to an extent that you kind of really go to personal attacks. So yes, if we really go by the notion of trolling, yeah, that's probably something which is a little more serious. I think we try to troll others assuming that we know the thing completely, or when we are not able to frame the argument correctly, because otherwise we would have been confident. Yeah. So thanks a lot for bringing this up, Aish, because, you know, one of the basic reason why in cyber psychology, one of the basic reason why person trolls, one is because of personal insecurity. Two, when that person kind of feels personal attack by a comment which is posted on net, which is not directed towards him or her. And third, and most importantly, when you do not have a channel of expressing your opinion otherwise, when you find a kind of an easy target, because in social media, you can simply click a few buttons to send that message. Now, in this context, I would like to play a very small video. Just allow me to...
Trolls have a malicious intent when they are communicating. They want to provoke other people. They want to make them angry. They want to get a reaction. They want a nice emotional reaction at the expense of others. Our study was specific to surveying trolls on Reddit, and we wanted to look at trolling behaviors and why people do it, and also how people perceive trolling in a platform like this. From our research, we found that trolls have certain personality traits, which are often called the dark triad. This consists of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. But it's not just possessing those personality traits that actually leads someone to be a troll. In fact, you really need to have Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is the tendency to receive pleasure from the misfortune of others. Those who possess Schadenfreude actually think that trolling performs a certain function in an online community. They think it's funny. They enjoy it. Trolls do know they're trolls. We know incivility in many forms, whether it's bullying or trolling, is pervasive online. And so being able to understand why it's occurring is really important.
So, you know, why I just played this is to give you an understanding that just because a person possesses some specific personality traits doesn't immediately mean that the person will be trolling. But then there are multitude of factors: loneliness, increased time spent in cyber world, introversion, when a person, as I told you, very importantly, is not able to express his or her opinions in alternative methods. That kind of leads to getting a strange pleasure by insulting or by pointing fingers at others. Now, this is, of course, only one of the explanations. There may be others who can simply disagree with you because they kind of feel insulted by your message, or they're just believer of one particular set of facts. Now, why this is important is that in each of the case, if you understand why the other person is directing the comments at you, the reaction can be different. Now, before we go as to what can be done, if your colleague shares that he or she has been harassed sharing, a particular news, and this has been going on for some time, what do you do? So, what have you done, or
sorry, Dr. Debanjan, but I think the slides are not playing. I think this is the last slide of your video that was played.
Okay, just a minute.
You'll have to stop share and maybe start share again.
Is fine now?
This is fine.
Yes. So can we have some quick replies, please?
Yes, everyone.
So, somebody has shared that they have been facing online abuse for some time. And I'm sure that has happened with many, many of you. So what have you suggested them? Because, you are in the field, so you'll be the great, your understanding will be better. So report to authorities, take a break. Okay, I'm not sure what good means though. Reporting to authorities, okay. I believe that your response was also guided by the context of abuse. Ignore and be resilient, okay. Don't pay attention to troll if you are right. So, that's great that all of you have really, really been positive towards a colleague who has been facing this. But at the same time, if you have, okay, right, guide her ways to tackle the situation. Yes. So if you see, many of your responses also kind of mirror or resonate with the responses that other people have told you when you kind of faced online abuse. Because sometimes why I wanted to get your perspectives on this is sometimes this becomes so common and so much a part of your day-to-day life and exercise that you may not even understand it as a separate threat. Aish mentions that the troller might lack an important skill. I think critical thinking. Exactly. Great. Thank you for mentioning this. Unfortunately, Aish, in many places, especially in social media, evidence-based argument is something which is a myth. It is fiction. Especially, at least in many of our places, we are not really able to give our arguments because in the time span that I will type my argument, 15 more trolls probably take its place. But definitely it's important to put your evidence and facts. So what are the factors you need to consider when you are discussing? What is the context? Of course, if it is physical, if it is to your loved ones, you have to put your foot down, you have to take legal step. Persistence, whether it is just one comment out of the blue or whether the person is kind of targeting you. What is the identity? Whether the person is anonymous, whether it is coming from a group, whether it is coming from, again, a belief system, whether there is a presence of physical threat or harm, which again is the red sign where you need to draw a line. Do you have people around you, whether in your office, your colleagues, your superiors, your family, who will kind of take your back and help you kind of traverse through it? What are the living arrangement? Of course, if you are alone and, if you are, if you have a security threat, then there will be other things that you need to consider if it is that serious enough. And if you are actually facing any psychological consequences for the abuse, because the threshold for taking it also may not be same for everyone. So based on the International Center for Journalism, there are 5 key action points. First, you have to build a digital rights literacy. Like we talk about digital literacy, we also have to talk about digital rights, what and what not can happen in journalism. There are established safety practices. Them are mentioned loosely in the Press Council of India guidelines, but the ICFJ document beautifully mentions that conduct risk assessments at an organizational level with each of their employee, specifically directing people who are at high risk and people who have reported it. Implement a 3-layered support mechanism: 1 in the office that you are working, 2 in your social circle and your family, and 3 and in a legal circle if you really feel that your security is threatened. And also sometimes split the roles and tasks, among different people, so that, the reporting is kind of a little bit disseminated, so there is no one particular targeted abuse. There's a few technical tips, data mapping, which many of you have already done, which is a part of data security, removing all personal sources of data identification, data authentication and verification, not letting others use your portal, trying to always, and I'm sure all of you do this, but this is just a generic measure to kind of retain your professionalism whenever you are posting any comments, and do not engage in a troll battle or in self-censorship, because once you kind of start cutting down on your thoughts, you will see that this cutting down has really no end. I'll be happy to share these information of these online courses. Each of the course mentioned here, especially the internationally online course and a document which kind of mentions step-by-step approach. Though I personally feel that even though the content is applicable, but many of the content is very westernized. So if any of you anytime think of making an Indian version of the manual, that is going to be fantastic. This may not be very much visible to you, but I hope the bold, the black is visible. So, again, this is a step-by-step approach in the Troll Busters report, that if somebody is attacking your website, if somebody has posted an insult, if somebody has posted a critique, and somebody has posted a libelous comment, somebody is impersonating your account, somebody has kind of posted inappropriate photographs without your consent, somebody has posted an implied threat, or somebody has posted a very personal attack, how do you really step-by-step go about it? And if you really see in each of these, especially the red ones, they are dangerous and they need to be reported without much ado. But you also have to remember that in many such cases, every time you may not be able to report, or every time you may not be able to take, people may not take you seriously. So it's always better to keep a record, professional profile separation. At any point of time, if you really feel that, that this is kind of not letting you sleep, or this is becoming too much for you, or you do not know how to get about it, always remember that from the first day onwards, you need to have a social circle to discuss the matters. And here comes the importance of a peer support network. Training and this is what we are doing now, I'm sure, helping others. Chat and a free forum. This may seem like a very simple and basic step, but you have to have a plan. Each troll or each abuse, especially when it becomes serious. And if you choose to respond, how do you respond? Because if it is something which is an ongoing issue, let's say in the news, it's a national issue, it's an international issue, something, let's say like the Russia-Ukraine war at one point where everybody was talking about it, then if you post anything which is against the popular opinion, then obviously this may have a flurry of reactions. Now, As long as you can continue working, ignoring what the trail of messages that is happening, fine. But if one point of time you think that it is getting on your nerves and you are not even able to get the support and it's interfering with your personal schedule, you have to put a line there. And furthermore, you have to seek professional help. And very importantly, even if you are working and you are facing online abuse at that point of time, that is not your entire life. So have your hobbies, your time, your work-life balance in straight. We have discussed in detail about it during our last workshop, especially in terms of how to handle stress. And, this happens to a lot of journalists. So maybe I'll just skip this question for now, since we are running a little short of time. But at the end, I really want your, or maybe as we proceed, you can please put your reaction in the chat as to when you have faced online abuse or trolling. Think back, reflect, and tell me, how have you felt? 1 word, 2 words, but please put down your feelings in the chat. How have you felt? When we talk about mental health or mental well-being, it's not just absence of mental illness. You don't need to feel depressed. You don't need to have anxiety for that. But when your coping is getting affected, when you're not able to work productively, and when you are not satisfied with your work. So if any of these happens, your mental well-being is threatened. You have to prioritize your mental well-being. Irrespective of abuse or troll that you are facing online, maintain a screen-free time, have your alternate set of activities, know your limit, which is extremely individualized. Just because the person beside you in your next cabin has gone into a fierce troll fight and won, you don't have to do that. Your limit may be different. Silence is, of course, extremely golden at times. You need to know when to stay silent. Anger and stress management, so relaxation exercises, yoga, deep breathing, having some time free at the end of the day, having a sound sleep, and food will be extremely important, because that will kind of make you better. And it's important to process the threat. The more time you take initially, the better you fare later. And finally, how do you know that things are really crossing the boundary? Long-term difficulty in sleep, nightmares, heart conditions, feeling pain or discomfort in the heart, continuous anxiety, feeling extreme guilt, long-time absenteeism from work, weight loss, and thoughts of self-harm really signal that you are entering into a clinical depression. So you have to seek help as much as possible. Now, I am not the right person for technical help issues, but these are based on my own personal experience and discussion with cybersecurity experts. So these are some tips which you can do in terms of technical security, especially occasionally running a Google alert for your name, using softwares like Privacy Badger, using two-factor authentication, watching for phishing attacks, having a firewall, and there is this RSF safety guide for journalists. Please feel free to check this out online, and it has beautifully highlighted the digital security rules. And if you are attacked, this is how the basic way of responding. Inform your colleagues and superiors. Continue to block abusive content. Do not go on a counter-offensive. Make sure that you know people who are around you, and disconnect from social networks for several hours if that gives you a mental peace. Make sure that your mental health is a priority, and make sure that you keep evidence that you have. Okay, so one of you have requested for the previous slide. Here it is. Don't worry, I'll share the content later on. And this is the document, which is again freely available online, which is a troll report from, the flowchart was taken from this document. Here are a few first-person accounts. Now, even though the names are anonymized, these individuals are from, the topmost notch of journalism across the world. And if you actually go through a first-person accounts, you will see that each of them have their own way of dealing, processing trolls and reacting to it. There is no one ground rule. There is nothing which is perfect, but this is how most of you respond. And with experience and with discussion, not only you, but all of your friends and colleagues will be more confident to deal with online abuse and troll. Very importantly, I'd like to share one last thing before we end. None of us like to be abused. None of us like to see negative content, and it is not about critique of journalism. Critiquing journalists or critiquing news reporters is a fantastic thing, and it leads to a lot of positivities. But always remember, if your identity and your self-esteem is intact, and if you know what you are doing is right or wrong, irrespective of if the world stands against you, you know the best what you have to do. Never let anyone grab hold of that self-esteem, which is so unique and precious to each of you. I'll end here. Thanks again for your patient listening and participation. Thank you. So we have some questions here, and when talking about victims of online abuse, yes, of course. I mean, see, in today's world, there is nothing which is gendered. So we cannot always tell that, it's always man on one side of the table and woman on the other side. Especially with social media giving us significant anonymity, it can go either way around. But, I don't know whether to call it fortunate for males or unfortunate for women. Data shows that there is a significant discrepancy in terms of how and in what context men and women journalists are abused. And that's the reality. So what I try to mean is that, it's not that men, women, or women, men is important. What is important is sexual harassment, personal threats, physical threats are still directed more towards women because of, gender stereotypes all around us. At one point, should I think it's a serious mental issue? I think I just showed you the red flag indicator. When it affects your appetite, your sleep, you are continuously anxious, jittery. You think you are not even able to go to the office. You think of quitting a job. You think of taking a break. You feel that, the stress has kind of gone and converted itself into distress. Self-harm is a very, very important indicator. But I would rather prefer that before even these indicators come into picture, if you feel that you are not able to deal with it, and every person knows that line for themselves, so please seek professional help at that very point of time. I have a friend who has approached a counselor for mental health issues, but she did not benefit. See, I should point out something here. Let's take the example of diabetes. It can be dealt with by diet restriction, by exercise, by lifestyle changes. It can also be dealt with by medication. So these two treatments are not exclusive. At early stages, you can always approach a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist for psychotherapy or counseling. But if the clinical judgment is that you have already severe symptoms, you are currently in a clinical state of depression, you have to be put on medicines. And let me be very clear here as a psychiatrist, let's get done with this myth for once and all that psychiatric medicines are something exotic coming out of Jupiter. No, they are not. It's just like your diabetes, hypertension, COVID, malaria medicines, just like that. Our medicines rather have much better side effects than them. So do not feel afraid, but feel free to discuss with your doctor how many medicines for what duration you need to take and what side effects you can expect. Are there any India-specific resources? The Press Council of India does have a very brief, document on how do you need to deal with and go ahead with online reporting of abuse. But unfortunately, the best of my knowledge, I haven't found any specific Indian document, but the ICFJ has been accepted by the PCI, and so it holds true for India as well. Does blocking the harasser, disabling comments help? It does. And in fact, if you feel that it is getting too much and it's an individual who is causing the chaos or it's gone personal, the best way is to go about it. However, you have to understand the intention of a person by the reaction. If you see that the person is coming again and again, irrespective of blocking, some people may create another fake account simply to target you, then you have to understand that things have gone personal. Because some people have a generic nature of trolling or abuse. Some people might be there online simply and to target you specifically. So that is a one-to-one attack, and you need to deal with it not only psychologically, but also legally. Also, I am currently posting my email ID. So many of you may have questions which are not answered here, and I'll be free to take them up in the next 1 week's time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions, Surbhi. So I think, yeah.
No, I think thank you so much, Dr. Debanjan here. And thanks for sharing your email ID as well. I'm sure this session was really, really helpful. And when our participants go back and think about it, maybe they will have more questions for you. And please, everyone, feel free to write to us. Dr. Debanjan has been really, really kind to share his email ID. You can also write to us, and we can also send it across to him. But like we said in the beginning, that this topic is of utmost importance. It's a serious matter. Your mental health really matters. So if there is anything that you want to reach out to us for, please feel free to write to us. But before we call it a day and before we close the session, I would request all of you to please fill in a feedback form. We just want to know, have we covered all ground? Is there anything else that we need to also cover? Because we will keep doing such webinars and to reach out to all, specifically for all our GNI folks and our own journalists and fact checkers. If there is anything else that you want us to do, there is a feedback form in here. Just take a moment. Jyoti has, please take out a moment to fill it up. With that, thank you so much, Dr. Debanjan. But before we go, I think one last thing that we started in the beginning is still left, and here we go. Though we had the answer quickly, I think Pratibha got it all right. And the fastest one is, the word scramble is, mental health matters, make it your priority. So it was a game, but that's the story. That's the moral of the story. And that's what we're closing it with, that it's very important. You take care of your mental health and reach out for help if required. We're all here for a support. This is a support system that we run. So thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to get in touch with us and stay safe. Take care of your health. Take care of your physical health and take care of your mental health as well. It's equally important. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Debanjan. On behalf of Google News Initiative and Team DataLEADS, a big thanks to everyone present here today.
Thank you, Surbhi, and thanks to all for participating. Thanks for choosing mental health as a priority. It's always great for us as mental health professionals to be here, part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking our time for this session.